Okay, on now to Ukraine. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Really interesting essay by Charles Kupchan. Now, why does that matter? He is both a professor of international relations at Georgetown University, but important for our purposes, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, which is like the establishment of the establishment in foreign affairs, and then even more so, writing in the New York Times with a headline which you would never have seen before called, "It's Time to Bring Russia and Ukraine to the Negotiating Table." So here's what he opens with. The war in Ukraine is dangerously escalating. Ukraine is advancing on the battlefield and is growing only more determined to expel Russian troops. In the meantime, the Kremlin reinforces its beleaguered forces in eastern Ukraine, pounds Ukrainian cities. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies are sending more weapons to Ukraine, prepared as the G7 democracies recently stated to stand firmly for as long as it takes. Ukraine has put up a staunch and inspiring defense of its sovereignty, but the risk of a wider war between NATO and Russia is rising by the day, as is the risk that economic blowback from a prolonged war would undermine American democracy. It is time for the United States and its allies to get directly involved in shaping Ukraine's strategic objectives, managing the conflict, and seeking a diplomatic endgame. So the rest of the op-ed is very, very worth reading. What I enjoy about this essay, it's actually framed in center-left terms, right? So it's like, well, the idea that a right-wing party would win is anti-democratic, but he's saying like, well, the economic wins are actually to your detriment if that's something that you care about. He doesn't even mention nuclear weapons there. He talks about the, quote, wider war, about the proximity and the prospect of NATO and other countries of miscalculation. And the reason why I think it's important is that it highlights actually an inspiring story about why diplomacy and talking to your enemies, even when it sucks, is very important. Let's put this up there, the next part, which is that from Max Seddon of the Financial Times highlighted this quote from a New York Times story, which says, officials say phone calls between Western and Russian counterparts late last month helped ease nuclear tensions. A speech by Putin in which he denied that Moscow was prepared to use a nuclear weapon further lowered the temperature. So why does that matter? Because that piece, which he's quoting that from, actually comes from U.S. officials compiling intelligence and briefing it to the President of the United States that Russian military leaders were very seriously discussing the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. So contrary to all of the he's bluffing and all of that, their most senior military generals were actually saying, no, we actually might use these nukes.
About this.
We should do it. Maybe we shouldn't. We should present nuclear options to President Putin. Now, ultimately, Putin, I mean, look, he says, of course, we would not use it. He also said he would invade Ukraine. So who knows? It's like not exactly the most credibility. But the point is that at the highest level of the Russian military, the CIA and others were saying that they were having serious discussions around nuclear weapons use. Even more troubling, by the way, in this piece is that the whole idea of Americans would have a heads up, it's actually completely fake, which is that we apparently don't have any real insight into the Russian nuclear arsenal beyond like a very cursory look. And in any terms of warnings would actually probably come after usage. We'd be like, hey, sir, there is no forward warning.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that in every article that talked about the possibility of Putin using a tactical nuclear weapon, they make sure to say, we've seen no signs, and officials assure us that we would know in advance, and now it's like, no, we probably wouldn't know till that shit happens. Yeah, so that's cool. It was interesting to me, too, first of all, on that first op-ed, really go and read the whole thing, because he also goes through, and I think this is very useful, here's what a negotiated diplomatic settlement could actually look like.
Yes.
To get to that level of concrete specificity of like, here's the outlines of what a deal could potentially look like, and here are the trade-offs, and here are the parts that are really hard. Really useful to go through all of that. The other thing that was interesting to me is after this piece came out in the New York Times, where they're like, they were discussing it according to our intelligence community, and actually it was the communications between U.S. leadership and Russian leadership, which had not been happening, and even though there was all this weird like, oh, Ukraine, dirty bomb, and whatever, those communications helped to pull them back from the brink. Something else we've been saying this whole time is like, you have to be in communication. Even during the Cold War, there was communication, constant communication. That really, really matters in terms of protecting the globe's safety. So that's one thing. Very interesting to me, right after this comes out, CNN gets a different leak from the deep state that's like, well, we didn't really have confidence in that intelligence product. And there were disputes about whether or not that was real. So definitely there were factors in there factions in there who wanted to downplay this report. They say the assessment drafted by the National Intelligence Council is not a high confidence product and is not raw intelligence, but rather analysis. Multiple people who have read it told CNN. For that reason, some officials believe the conversations reflected in the document may have been taken out of context, don't necessarily indicate that Russia is preparing to use a nuclear weapon. So somebody, once again, trying to be like, no, nuclear weapons, they're not even thinking about that. Don't even worry about that, because that then justifies the continued direction of U.S. policy.
I would highlight the words of Kevin Rudd. For those who don't know, he's the former PM of Australia. Why does that matter? Well, Kevin Rudd was a member of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing agreement, which is the most sensitive U.S. intelligence shared amongst Western partners. Now, he tweets in response to this news, quote, "This is dangerous. U.S. intelligence does not brief like this unless threat is credible. Remember, few believed U.S. warnings of impending Russian invasion. Time for Beijing to urgently intervene and stop Russian nuclear madness." So, I mean, look, the former PM of Australia thinks it's very serious because he also used to once upon a time get briefings like this, and we have the highest level of intelligence sharing happens within the Five Eyes Alliance. So the point is that people took it seriously. For it to get briefed to the president, that means it's incredibly serious.
Yeah.
The idea of forward warning and all of that is fake. And I just want to highlight, the fact that those conversations happened is all really you and I have ever been saying from this beginning.
Yeah.
We're like, look, support Ukraine. Nobody's saying you shouldn't support Ukraine. We should support Ukraine while keeping in mind all of our red lines. In fact, I think that one of the things that he writes in this op-ed, which is so critical, is, quote, Ukraine battlefield success could go too far. If the defense of Ukraine is not worth U.S. boots on the ground, the return of the Donbass and Crimea to Ukrainian control is not worth risking a new world war. Imagine thinking that that's controversial. But
Many do,
we
apparently.
need to discuss and think about things in terms of parity and have to be able to have a cool head. Negotiating with your enemies really sucks. I really encourage everybody to go and watch the new It's All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix. I saw it in theaters, but they actually added some parts in the movie that weren't in the book about the actual negotiation between the German Democratic Republic, the newly formed GDR, and the actual French forces, and how difficult it was to capitulate by the Germans. But there was the lead negotiator was like, every hour that this war goes on, thousands are dying. And it was the juxtapose of the elites in this train carriage. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but they're basically like living an opulent lifestyle. And then they would flash back to the actual Western Front of, guys with rats crawling out of their eyes and dying in the mud. Anyway, I mean, that's the reality of what these things are. So the point is that they were highlighting, and it shows you how difficult it is to negotiate with your enemies, but why it's critical and why it has to happen in the first place.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.